Biracial Politics in America, Part 1, entitled Choose a Side. Back when I was in insurance sales, when I first got out of college, we had what was called the Benjamin Franklin Clause, the Ben Franklin Clause. And what you would do is list all the positives of your policy on one side, and of course the prospect would list all the negatives or all the hesitations they had on their side, and hopefully you had more positives than they had negatives, and you would make the sale. So I'm gonna try to do a quick Ben Franklin close for all of you Republicans, MAGA, Trump supporters out there. Because currently, migrant crossings are down, crime is down, inflation is down, gas prices are down, unemployment is down, GDP is up. The stock market seems to be setting a record every week. We have more oil produced currently than any other time in American history, I think. And the U.S. is more energy independent than it has been, in my memory at least. Also, we have the best post-COVID recovery of any civilized nation on the planet Earth. Come on. Most legislation passed in modern history. That's just a quick Ben Franklin checklist. But folks, I'm going to break down my argument against MAGA, former President Trump, and the Republicans in three areas: lies, Roe v. Wade, and racism. Because after all, this is biracial politics in America. So I'm going to try to stay true to form. My argument against Trump and the Republicans goes way back to the very beginning when they started with kids in cages and the child separation policy. And before you come at me with, oh, the child separation policy wasn't under his administration, I don't care who came up with child separation policy. It is mean-spirited, and it doesn't care about the migrants. I mean, there are still hundreds of kids who have not been reunited with their parents. I mean, you just think about someone taking your child away if you have children, and, just going, oops, we have no idea where we sent them. Let's move forward a little bit to Charlottesville. And I grew up in Williamsburg, Virginia. I went to school in Richmond, Virginia, but I've gone to Charlottesville. I looked at UVA, didn't have the grades to get in, but it's a beautiful area. And the fact that they had white men and boys with tiki torches chanting, "Jews will not replace us." And I don't know how that's just not played currently with the current election. And then the president coming out at the time and going, there were good people on both sides. Because I have never met a devout racist or a Nazi supporter or someone who supports Nazi ideology that is a good person. Let's move to the debate between, I believe at the time it was Hillary Clinton and former President Trump, and he talked and they said, denounce white supremacist group and, the Proud Boys. And he told the Proud Boys, quote, stand down, but stand by. And he may have flipped that around. But the main thing was, yeah, he denounced them, but he said, hang around because, January 6th is coming. The lies. Let's start with the lies. Because it goes back for former President Trump, doesn't it? It goes back to, I received a small loan from my dad. That small loan was north of $400 million. He got a $500 million head start. And he's had several bankruptcies that was pointed out during the debate with Vice President Harris. So you think about your career. If you got a $500 million head start and were allowed to have several bankruptcies, would you be able to make it in this country? And let's talk about the bankruptcies. Trump University, he had to settle that either shortly before or shortly after he became president. There are so many Trump projects, that the Taj Mahal. How many people lose a casino to bankruptcy? Then the Trump companies were held liable for fraud and misleading business tactics. And that settlement went against the Trump organization. But the New York State AG victory was versus Donald Trump himself. And I believe that's north of $400 million. Now, he has the appeal process, which is his right. But that settlement still stands until it's overturned, or if it's overturned on appeal. More recently, let's get into the lies about cats and dogs of Haitian migrants. I enjoy the memes as much as anybody, but that town is suffering from bomb threats. They've had to close schools. It has become a burden on that community. And yeah, you may laugh at the Haitians in that community going, well, I'm glad I'm not Haitian and living in Springfield, Ohio. But what happens when it's your turn in the barrel? What happens when the ridicule goes against your group? I don't think it'll be as funny. Finally, every rally, every single time Donald Trump is in front of a microphone, he has to be fact-checked. There are so many lies, you just can't even keep track. Or I know they don't even bother keeping track during the debates. During the debate with Vice President Harris, they fact-checked him a couple of times. But most of his lies went unchecked. And during his rallies, he can say whatever he wants. He can bring up fictitious characters as his supporter. And if you get into the lies, how about the perception? The perception of the Republicans as the law and order party. Let's go back with that again to Trump's treatment of the Central Park Five at the time. They were accused of a vicious rape and murder. And Donald Trump took out a full-page ad, trying to get them executed. This is before, they've even been tried and convicted. And even after they've been exonerated, they're now the exonerated five. He has not apologized. He has not withdrawn anything he's done. Anytime he's wrong, think of how he got in the political scene with the birther movement, with former President Obama. Once the long version of Obama's birth certificate was released, he just said, okay, we'll move on. He didn't apologize. He didn't go, I falsely accused President Obama of being born in this country. He just moved on to another line of attack. Speaking of a line of attack, let's talk about The Apprentice, because he was famous for saying, you're fired. And he was given that image of this spotless and great business person. If he was great, who's unsuccessful? Because I think if you lose hundreds of millions of dollars in business, you're not a great business person. And it's now coming out that they couldn't even use the Trump area in his office building because it was so run down. They had to make a separate boardroom. They basically created his business image from whole cloth, like he does most of his lies. They come, just really out of his head and out of his mouth with nothing to back it up. I love Rudy Giuliani talking about, we have all these theories about how the election was rigged. We just don't have any evidence. Continuing on with no evidence, let's talk about the continued infrastructure week and months and years that became a bit of a joke during the Trump presidency, because he not only did not produce any infrastructure, he simply didn't have any ideas. I think the only legislation he passed during his 4 years was the tax break for the that benefited mostly wealthy people like himself. He wasn't lifting children out of child poverty. He wasn't looking to do what Obamacare did and get health care for millions of people. He wasn't looking for loan forgiveness. He was looking for a way to promote himself without doing any of the work. And during the last debate with Vice President Harris, when she goes, well, what's your plan? You know, I don't really have a plan, Donald Trump said, but I have concepts of a plan. He's been trying to get Obamacare repealed since he was president, and he still only has concepts of a plan. I just think that's unbelievable. So those are just some of the lies. Now, let's get into the attack on Roe v. Wade. With this, I'm going to talk about my abortion story. I know you may be thinking, Robert, you're a guy. You can't have an abortion story. I believe I can. When my wife and I got married, we had, during our service, the unity candle. And in my faith, during the marriage ceremony, two become one, which is symbolized through the unity candle during the service. We have two boys. One is now 17, one is 24. Between the two boys, we had a pregnancy of our daughter. The pregnancy was unfortunately fell victim to trisomy 13. You can look up to many symptoms and results of trisomy 13. It happens in 1 in every 10,000 to 20,000 births, but it happened to us. And our daughter's pregnancy was not viable. Let me repeat that. Our daughter's pregnancy was not viable. Our daughter's pregnancy had to be aborted, had to be ended because of that. And during that time, we were attacked by our fellow Christians. We went to a mega church in Alpharetta, Georgia, and we were active in that church. We hosted Bible studies. I taught Sunday school, which at that church was called a small group leader. We were attacked by the very Christians we worship with every week for having an abortion. Did they know that our pregnancy was not viable? No. And I don't believe they cared. When they did find out, I think they were worried about how that would look. And they sent people to our house to pray with us and to ask for our forgiveness. And I said, there's no need for forgiveness because you didn't do this by accident. You attacked us on purpose and viciously attacked us, I might add, to the point where neither one of us, attended that church in the future. My wife left immediately. I had a commitment through my small group volunteerism where I finished with the group that I was with, and I ended my volunteerism at that church. We both attended different churches, and my wife is now doing a lot of her Christian ministry online. I think she should do it full time. She's incredible. She will get on Christian TikTok and talk to atheists, Muslims, anybody that will have an intellectual debate with her on their faith, which she will study up on, and especially about the Christian faith, which we are both baptized into. And she will do her homework. We have, our bedroom looks like a library. We have copies of the Quran. We have copies of, she took Hebrew to the point where she actually just taught a Hebrew class. But I may be digressing. Going back to the loss of our daughter. If it had been in the state of Georgia where we reside currently, if it had been now, and we didn't have the means, which we do, to go somewhere else for an abortion, I really am scared to think what type of physical condition my wife would have had to be in before they would have helped save her life. Just recently, at the time of this podcast, there was a story about a young lady from Georgia who I think she did a medical, an abortion through medication, and she had to have a procedure after that, and she went to the hospital to do it, but because of the heartbeat law, the doctors and the staff there were scared of losing their medical license or being sued, but they did not treat her right away. Her symptoms got so severe, she actually died before they rendered care, but she died because they let her condition get so bad. And I think that story is going to be repeated hundreds and unfortunately thousands of times in this country until we legislatively get women's protections back up and going again. And Donald Trump has taken credit for the overturning of Roe v. Wade. He has said for 50 years they tried to get rid of it, but I did it. And then he gives this nonsensical, I turned it back over to the states. Well, that's the reason we have precedent-setting cases through the Supreme Court that are good for all the states. He wanted Roe v. Wade overturned, and it's been overturned. Now he realizes it's not a popular stance to run on politically, and he's trying to run away from it. But we know he put 3 members of the Supreme Court that are just as big of a nut job and just as radical as he is. And they voted down through the Dobbs decision the protections of Roe v. Wade. Which brings me to racism. My question to you is, what do you care about other than yourself? I think we all care about ourselves. I work out. I try to take care of myself. I can't even tell you how many doctors I see between my skin doctor and my dentist and my eye doctor and my general practitioner. And I'm considered healthy. So I have a great self-love of myself because I try to take care of myself and I have all these medical professionals looking out for me. What do you care about outside of yourself? I ask you that question because how many minorities have to be abused? Because it seems like, and I'm biracial, so this isn't a black-white thing, it seems like every time there's a police-involved shooting, it's a minority. I never see any, very attractive white people being shot and killed by the police. I see them being arrested, and they may be armed with an AR-15, and they'll be arrested. Interesting. How many women have to die through losing their reproductive rights, the rights to make decisions for their own body? How many of them have to suffer and die? How many poor people have to suffer? We have a foster daughter, and she visits relatives in an area of town that's a little bit poorer than where we live. We live in East Cobb, and just north of Atlanta. It's a very beautiful area. But where my stepdaughter goes, not my stepdaughter, my apologies, where my foster daughter goes to visit her relatives is a poorer area of town. And I noticed where they have satellite towers, receiving and transmitting towers, they're not even landscaped. It's just a fenced in area with the tower and the cellular receptors and things at the top. They don't even try to hide it. Here in East Cobb, they look like trees. They decorate them. They look rather pleasant. A lot of industry down there, I noticed. Although we have a lot of manufacturing in Marietta, you go to a manufacturing place, it's landscaped, the building looks nice, the trucks look good. How many poor people have to suffer? How many schools in a poor area have to suffer from lack of resources? And it doesn't have to be, I'm not talking dirt poor, like we have schools. But for example, in the Marietta or the Cobb County School District, when they're given a computer by the school, it's 1 student to 1 computer. Next door in Cherokee County, the students have to share their computers because they're a little bit poor. So just little things like that, which don't affect you if you don't have any kids that have to share a computer. But imagine the learning and how that affects the learning when 2 people have a resource as opposed to that 1 resource being toward 1 student. How many gay and lesbians have to be marginalized? I'll never forget my first cousin explaining his gay lifestyle to me because I thought, I was a young teenager. I just thought it was a birth defect or something. I didn't know. I was a young kid. And my name with my relatives was Bobby. And he goes, Bobby, what's your favorite color? And I said, blue. He asked me why. I said, out of all the colors, I like the color blue the most. He said, out of the two sexes, I like men more than women. To this date, I've never heard a better explanation for the gay and lesbian lifestyle. His life was a living hell. He got beat up. His car was vandalized. He couldn't go certain places alone because he feared for his safety. Now, I'm 63, so this was many years ago. Like I said, I was a young teenager at the time. But it still is where, the gay and lesbian community is still trying to fight for their rights to simply exist, to simply be by their loved one's side in the hospital and have all the benefits of marriage of just making medical decisions. And how many people like that are going to be marginalized before we give them the legislation to hold each other's hand when they're done, to just be in the room? How many Hispanics, Jews, more currently Haitians, and other races or religious groups have to be terrorized, simply terrorized for being a member of that group? And you may be thinking, well, I'm not a member of that group, so why should I care? Well, there's an old Jewish saying where, when they came for the gypsies, I didn't say anything because I wasn't gypsy. They go through a bunch of groups and they go, when they came for me, nobody said anything because there was no one left. So let me tell you, maybe you're in a protected group. Maybe you're in a group that no one will ever come after. Like I asked at the beginning of this brief segment, what do you care about other than yourself? Because I've learned by being a member of the biracial community, there are a lot of mixed races. And not only that, there are a lot of mixed families. A lot of people get remarried. They have 2 or 3 kids from one marriage. Another person may have a kid from another marriage. And maybe they're a blended family, blended being biracial or having an ethnic influence in their children. Now it's all of a sudden, it's a part of what if your child goes out and marries a minority or gets married to someone who has a child that may be a minority? So don't worry. If they haven't come for you or yours yet, give it time. They will. They will unless you speak up for the people that are being attacked and terrorized now, so that there's zero tolerance for that, so that no one is deemed worthy of that type of treatment, because no one is. And you simply have to choose a side. You can't say, I support life, and yet after the baby is born, you shoot down everything: child tax credit, chips, any type of benefit that a child can have after birth. Your legislative body shoots that down. You can't say you're pro-life and just want the child to be born and then don't give a rat's you-know-what about that child after it's born. You can't say, oh, I just voted for Donald Trump, but I'm not a racist. Well, think about that, if you would. If I'm a getaway driver for a bank robbing crew and they kill someone during the bank robbery and we're all apprehended while I'm trying to drive them away from the crime scene, I'm not charged with a moving violation. I'm not charged with a driving violation. I'm charged with armed robbery and possibly murder because I'm a part of the crew. When people voted for Hitler in Germany, and I'm German by birth, they weren't just voting for Hitler. They were placing a vote for the Nazi Party, which means by their vote, they were a member of the Nazi Party. They were Nazis. So you can't just say, oh, well, I vote for Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jim Jordan, and all these idiots that accompany their leader. Because a leader can't be an idiot by himself. He needs henchmen. Like, Rudy Giuliani, who went after Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman, two election poll workers in Georgia, and ruined their lives by attacking them. And one of them in testimony to Congress goes, can you imagine having the President of the United States come after you? I can't. And I live in East Cobb. I'm a successful business owner. I do well. And I wouldn't want the president to come after me. He could ruin me with a thought. Would you want the President of the United States to come after you? And not for something you've done, for something that they lied about out of whole cloth. And they make it so you don't even want to say your name in public. So imagine how those poll workers felt, having the President of the United States attack them. How many more people have to suffer like those two women did before you say, you know what, I can't support that sort of vicious activity? And again, I don't have to just go to that. I could go back even further. When Trump used to hire contractors, he put so many small businesses out of business by basically saying, I'm not going to pay you. I'm going to pay you pennies on the dollar. If you don't like it, sue me. Some of them would sue and get paid, but their profit margin was eaten up by the fact they had court costs and attorney's fees. Some of them, I've even heard stories of small business owners committing suicide because by the time they finally got payment, they were so exhausted. They sold their assets to pay off all their creditors, and then they went home and unalived themselves. Folks, evil has a consequence. And if you vote for someone who's evil or a party that does evil acts, you're a member by your vote. You're party to whatever they accomplish, especially if it's mean-spirited and deadly in a lot of cases. So before you support evil, think about the opposite side that uses words like freedom, inclusion, the fact that they're a minority. Kind of hard to be a racist when you're a minority. Let me tell you, I'm biracial, so I'm a minority of a minority. Let me tell you, I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking, ooh, I'm in the dominant group, so I can put another group down. No, a lot of times people don't even know what I am. Oh, are you Hispanic? Are you Hawaiian? I love when my family visited Hawaii. All the Hawaiians just gave me their gesture for hang loose. And they look at my family and go, hello, how are you? Welcome to our island. Like, we know you're Americans. So how many more people, how many more groups, how many more religions, how many more races have to be attacked before you come around? Before you go, I'm not going to support evil. I'm not going to support a man who does nothing but say this country is the worst thing ever, when this country is, like President Biden says, there is nothing we can't do together. We're the United States of America. And you may be thinking, well, Rob, you must have all the answers. What's the answer? Well, I don't have all the answers, but I worship a Savior that does. And you know what I believe the answer is? Love. Love. For example, I have Republicans that I train. I actually have what I consider a total unicorn. I have a black man who is a Trump supporter as somebody I train. Now, do I think this young man is misguided? Yes. But do I hate him? No. I attended his wedding. I love this young man. I love his wife. They are about to have a child. I will love that child with the love of Jesus. I am so looking forward to them welcoming that child into their family. But I wish that they didn't support the policies of former President Trump and the Republican Party, but I can't hate him. I still have to love him. We can have difference of opinion politically, and I can still show love toward him and his family. Love is the answer, because love and hate cannot exist together. And if you choose love, you won't choose to take away women's rights. If you choose love, you won't want to see minorities abused, whether that minority is a race minority or a cultural minority. If you love someone, you can't see them be marginalized just because they love someone of the same sex and they want the rights of every other married couple. You can't love someone and spew hateful rhetoric. Love is the answer. And if you look at the doctrine of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the undercurrent of his doctrine in very existence is love. So that's my solution to the political discord in this nation. And I'm encouraged, if everyone does their civic duty and gets out and votes, I firmly believe in this beautiful country of over 350 million people that enough people will go into the voting booth and go, you know what? I choose freedom over persecution. I choose hope over putting down this country. I choose truth over lies. I think when you make those type of decisions in the voting booth, you will vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. And I think you will distance yourself not only from the doctrine of former President Trump, but from the Republican Party that hasn't done anything to help you and to move this country forward. And if they retool themselves and get some amazing people within their ranks, I think they can turn it around. But they're going to have to turn it around with good people doing good things. In other words, with love for fellow Americans, not with hate. So that's my solution. And I hope you continue to listen to my podcast, because this is only part one of Biracial Politics in America. Part two coming up.